Welcome to Chapter 2, Episode 4. In the previous episode, we took a break from our normal discussion and looked at some of the wider economic and social forces that influence the funding decisions as they pertain to scientific research. Today, we're going to return our focus to meditation, specifically the mysterious energetic component of it that we learned about in the first episode of this chapter, back when it was called somatic energy. Now we've got a new name for it, an energy-like somatic experience. And by the end of the episode, you'll have learned another word for it, the real word. And it rhymes with schmondellini. As part of the Varieties of Contemplative Experience project, a group of researchers at Brown, including our pal Dr. Willoughby Britton, published a paper on the energetic bodily sensations that many of the participants reported. Seeking to better understand the experience of these sensations, the researchers asked participants to describe them in depth. The most common way practitioners described ELSES was, not surprisingly, as energy or as energetic. Here are some of the other analogies and metaphors participants used. Note the references to spine and vertebra, waves of energy in the body, feeling like they were plugged into some energy outlet, a jolt of electricity from my heart to my head, bolts of electricity going up and down my spine. I felt my entire torso vibrating, standing next to a 747 as it's firing up its engines on the end of the runway. Going up my spine, there were these energetic bursts. It was like electricity. I felt I was on fire. It was like being on a rocket ship, like a vibration cascading through the body. The energy advances from one vertebra to another. You can feel the energy moving through your body and even through your brain all of the time. Okay, what in the world are these people talking about? I always thought meditation was about sitting quietly with your eyes closed. But that is clearly not what we're seeing here. But seriously, have you ever felt anything remotely like what's being described? Or are you just sitting there like Stephen A. Smith in one of my favorite memes? By the way, that was me for many years when it comes to this stuff. So if you're sitting there right now also looking like, know that I can totally relate. And you know what's funny? So can some of the participants who experience this energy firsthand, with this guy being my favorite. I just have to say, I hate chakras. I'm not interested in chakras. I kind of get this aversive quality around new agey people who talk about their chakras. I've never been interested in this shit. I still don't care about it. I never got caught up in it. But I also cannot deny the reality of my experience. So do I think that the deep concentration practices were causing either a purification or kind of helping me get this energy moving up my spine? Yeah, absolutely. Did it finally kind of break through the crown chakra? Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. So it would appear that believing in this stuff is not a prerequisite to experiencing it. There goes the placebo effect. Instead, what these findings suggest is that there's an independent physiological process involved. Now, physiological processes are going on in our body all the time, but we're usually not aware of them. So how is it that these people are feeling this energy? It all starts with the development of a skill called interoception, which is kind of like a sixth sense of sorts. But not the spooky M. Night Shyamalan kind. Rather, it's the perception of sensations from inside the body, including autonomic nervous system activity related to emotions. Much of these perceptions remain unconscious. What becomes conscious, in other words, interoceptive awareness, involves the processing of inner sensations so that they become available to conscious awareness. This is, of course, in contrast to exteroception, which refers to our awareness of the external world through the five senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, and sound. And if one develops their interoceptive awareness, and meditation is a great way to do that, one might start to become aware of the subtle energies in the body. Now, I realize how ridiculously new agey all of this sounds, okay? Total Stephen A. Smith vibes. But what's important to understand is that these waves of energy these people are talking about, that is reality. Like literally. We are all made up of waves of energy. Wait a minute, I thought we were made up of particles. So did I. But apparently particles themselves are just waves, just excitations in a field. It's kind of like when you're trying to make your bed and you get all those ripples in it. It's kind of like that. But don't just take my word for it. Here's what theoretical physicist Sean Carroll had to say on his Mindscape podcast. To skip some very hard steps, The answer is it's all waves, okay? That's the very short answer. There's really nothing particle-y about even electrons. Photons, electrons, quarks, neutrinos, they're not particles at all. They're all waves. So if we are made up of atoms, and atoms are made up of particles, and if particles are really made up of waves, then we are really made up of waves. We are waves. We are waves of energy. We are vibrations. And through meditation, one can learn to raise their vibration to the point of conscious awareness, at which point all kinds of funky stuff happens. Now, physicists tend not to like it when people talk about energy in the context of spirituality. But as the findings of this paper suggest, there is clearly something going on there, that we'll dive deeper into that relationship in later chapters. For now, I invite you to just try and be aware of the biases you may have against all this stuff, and be open to the idea that some of them might not be totally justified. So why are we even talking about this? What does any of this have to do with the relationship between psychosis and spiritual awakening? Great question! We learned in the first episode of this chapter that the energy participants reported feeling was often associated with the re-experiencing of past trauma. And we also know that a trauma history is a significant risk factor for developing psychosis. And then there's this. Multiple else's are part of a standardized taxonomy of experiences in schizophrenia spectrum disorders under the heading of synesthesias. And in a sample of first episode psychosis patients, synesthesias were one of the most common symptoms reported by the majority of patients. So there appears to be a link between these energetic sensations, these else's, and psychosis. And we have numerous examples of this in the paper. After energetic experiences that opened up all the trauma of her life, one participant began to feel manic and paranoid, and eventually required multiple hospitalizations for what she described as psychosis. Another had so much energy running that she didn't feel the need to eat or sleep. It didn't occur to her. She soon lost track of linear time and began having visual changes. It was almost like she was seeing energy instead of just seeing solid objects and believing that they were totally solid. She was ultimately admitted against her wishes to the psychiatric ward and treated with heavy-duty antipsychotic medications. Yet another said that he essentially went mildly insane. So what's the deal here? Why are we seeing all of this? Well, there are different frameworks through which to understand else's, but Kundalini was the most commonly used interpretive framework for describing else's by practitioners in this study. Hey, that rhymes with Schmundalini. It does. Now, the researchers are hesitant to ascribe all the participants' experiences to Kundalini for reasons which we'll get into in the coming episodes. The thing to know about Kundalini, or Kundalini awakening, is that while it's frequently mistaken for schizophrenia by Western doctors, it's ultimately a positive and even desirable occurrence. And in the coming episodes, we'll be discussing this strange dichotomy. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'm going to leave you with a quote now from Nikola Tesla that hopefully will start to make more and more sense as this series progresses. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.